Hey guys, Mr. Wiz here. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new to this channel, we build video games. So right now we are building stuff in Unity. In the last video, I showed you how to piece different 3D objects together and turn it into your own 3D object. The example that I did in the video was this tree here. Hopefully you created your own thing. So just a quick recap on some of the ideas there. If I open up the scene that we're in, you're going to see the tree. This is the object that I created. And if we click on the arrow next to tree, it'll open up and you'll see the different parts of it. So the leaves are its own thing, and the branch there is its own thing, but the tree trunk is the thing that I actually called tree here. So the leaves on top and the branch are both attached to the trunk. And if I use any of my tools here, I can move the tree, I can rotate it, I can scale it, I can do all those things because it's now acting as its own object. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make some more modifications to this object, and then we are going to turn it into a prefab. So what we're going to do first is create some materials for our objects. So down here in the project window, we are going to go ahead and get started by creating a folder. So in the assets right now, the only folder I have is the one you see there called scenes. I'm going to create a new folder to keep my stuff nice and organized. It's always helpful to have many folders for keeping your stuff straight, for keeping prefabs in a prefab folder, materials in a material folder, scenes in a scene folder, and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to right click in the asset section next to scenes, and we're going to choose to create, and we're going to choose the one up here that says folder. So we are creating a folder. Now I'm going to name this folder materials, because what we're going to do first before we make our prefabs is before we make our prefabs, we're going to create materials. So I'm going to double click on the material folder. It is currently empty. I'm now going to right click inside the material folder, and I'm going to create again. And this time there's all these different options here in the create section. We're going to create where it says material. So it should be right there. I'm using the 2022 version. But even on the older versions, I'm pretty sure it's in the same area. So I went to create material. So I'm going to go ahead and click that now. And there's my new material. And I can name it now. I will go ahead and name it. When you name materials, you should name them based on how you use them. So for my tree here, I'm going to make two different materials. One for the leaves and one for the bark. So I'm going to call this material leaves. And this will be the material that I make for my leaves. All right, so over here on the right-hand side with the leaves material selected, I can see all the different things that I can customize about it. So first thing I want you to notice is the rendering mode here where it says opaque. Do you know what opaque means? That's a fun vocabulary word. Any ideas what it means? If you are not familiar, opaque basically means that you can't see through it, right? An opaque object you cannot see through. The other version of that is if you click on it here, there's a couple other ones, but the other one that I sometimes use is transparent. A transparent material you can see through. So that's the big difference. Opaque, you can't see through it. Transparent, you can. Then where it says albedo, this is the color of your material. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the empty white box and choose a color for the leaves on my tree. So I've got the color wheel here. Obviously, I'm going to go with a shade of green. I kind of have to decide what shade I like the most. So I'm going to pick the color there, and then I pick the light-dark aspect here. You'll see that below this, you have the RGB values here as well. So a lot that you can play around with. And I think the A value here can adjust the transparency. So yeah, crazy, crazy stuff. Okay. So what shade of green do I want? Let's go with kind of a darker green, something like that. I like that. All right, so I'm going to close it. I have my green material here, and I can see the image down there on what it should look like. So let's just real quickly, let's go ahead and put this material on my leaves. I'm sorry, on my tree. So to put the material on your tree, you should have learned this if you did the micro games, the FPS micro game. You'd simply grab the material, drag it, and drop it. Now the leaves on my tree are that shade of green. And the cool thing is, after putting the material on the tree, I can still edit it. So now that I put it on the tree, maybe I don't like the color as much as I thought I did. So maybe I'm going to open it up We're going to go a little bit darker with it. And you'll notice as I'm making these changes, I can immediately see them changing on my object. This is the benefit of using a real-time game engine like Unity. The changes that you make update immediately, so you can see those changes in real time, as they call it. So now that we do have the material on there, let me just show you the difference between opaque and transparent. So in transparent, you can kind of see through the object a bit, right? I can see the horizon, not super well, but I can see it. And of course, as we mentioned, I could change that transparency here using this option, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, I'm going to go back to opaque because it doesn't make sense for my tree to be see-through. Okay, so below the green color, I've got these two scroll bars here. I love these. One says metallic and one says smoothness. These allow you to adjust how the light reflects off of your object. So right now, metallic is 0, and the smoothness is 0.5, and I can adjust those. So as I increase the metallicness, you can see the way the light reflects off of it changes, right? Also, if I increase or decrease the smoothness, the way the light reflects off of it changes. So at this point, I need to find the best metallicness and the best smoothness to create the image I'm looking for. So if I'm thinking about the leaves on the tree, how do I want them to reflect? Are they metallic at all? No. So I'm going to keep the metallicness at 0. For smoothness, it's not going to be super smooth. Super smooth is like glass, right? So if you do smoothness 1, that is the smoothest thing in the world. That's a marble or glass, something super, super smooth. I was going to say super shiny, but super shiny is more like metallic. So if I went super smooth and super metallic, you get that. I mean, look at that. That's gorgeous. Doesn't look like a tree, though. Looks like a marble. So you have to decide what works for the object that you're creating. So in my case, I'm going to keep some smoothness, not a lot. I might just leave it at 0.5, honestly. The original settings weren't bad on this one. Maybe a little bit less. Yeah, that's pretty good right there. I like that. All right, so these here, the opaque, the color, the metalness, and the smoothness, when it comes to basic colors, basic materials like we're doing right now, these are really all you need to worry about. The stuff below will factor in later, but for the most part, you don't have to worry about these. Tiling is good when you're using pictures, which we'll talk about when we do our buildings in a future video pretty soon. So we will talk about some of these later. The emission one, I'll just mention very, very, very briefly. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, that this wasn't a tree that I was creating, this was a light bulb, right? If I was creating something that gives off light, like a light bulb, or maybe you're building, what else would give off light? Maybe you're building a firefly and you want the rear end to glow, right? So if you're building something that gives off light, this emission bubble is awesome because you can click on this and then you would choose what color light it is creating. So here I'm giving it a yellow light, and you see it kind of lit up almost like a Christmas light. It kind of looks like now, right? So you create the color light, you create all that stuff. Then down here at the bottom where it says intensity, I can change the brightness of the light. So I can make it get really, really bright if I wanted to. So for a normal object, you would never worry about emission. This is only for, like I said, something that is actually glowing, like a light bulb. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off for my tree, because I do not want my tree to glow like a light bulb. But if I was making a Christmas tree, I might put some tiny little balls on the tree, right, to represent Christmas lights, and I could have those emit. So I could make Christmas lights for this tree if I wanted to. That'd be kind of cool, honestly. Maybe I'll make a variation of that sometime. But for now, let's turn the emission off. So I'm only really worried about the opaque, the color, the metalness, and the smoothness. We're going to do the same thing for the bark. And I'll knock this out real quick. So for the bark, I do want it to be brown in color. So let me see if I can find a shade of brown. If you didn't know, brown is really just dark orange. So if you go to orange and you scroll down here, here's some browns. Yep, that looks really good. So I'll throw that on my tree branch and my tree trunk. And now that I have it on there, I can adjust it a little bit, maybe get it a little bit darker. Yeah, I like that shade, pretty good. And I'm going to adjust the metalness and the smoothness. Let me zoom in a little bit here and maybe check it from a different angle because that little light is in my way right now. There we go. So let's see. I do want it to not be metallic at all. And I want it to be kind of coarse because it's a tree, so it should be kind of coarse, a little rough. I like it right there. That looks good to me. All right, cool. So I've got my colors done. At this point, go ahead and pause the video and create the materials for your object. You can create multiple materials. I do recommend you name them based on how you're using them. For instance, I forgot to name my bark materials. Let me go ahead and do that now. So I named the one leaves and the one bark. That's going to come in handy for later on so that I know what I'm using these materials on in my game. That's why we name them, so we know what we're using them on. So go ahead, create some color materials for your objects. Decide, are they going to be opaque or are they going to be transparent? What color are they going to be? And adjust the metalness and the smoothness to match your color. Don't worry about the rest of it unless, like I said, you are building something that has a light on it. Then you could use emission. Otherwise, I would ignore the other stats. Just focus on the color, the metalness, the smoothness, and whether or not it is transparent. Okay? So pause the video, add the colors to your object. I'll see you in a second. All right, we're back. So I've got my tree. It looks awesome. You hopefully have your object looking good. It's got colors on it that you like. You've played with the settings, so the light's reflecting off it the way that you want it to. Now's the part where we want to save our tree object. Well, obviously mine's a tree. Yours is whatever you built. What I want to do is I want to save our object as a prefab. The purpose of a prefab is that it allows us to quickly and easily grab that object when we need it again later. So I'm going to go down here to the project folder and I'm going to select assets. So I have my two folders, my material folder and my scene folder. We're going to make another folder. So I'm going to right click here next to scenes to create a folder, and we're going to call this folder Prefabs. So it'll be a place for us to keep our prefabs. I'm going to open it up. All right, right now the folder is empty. I want to make my tree a prefab. So over here in the sample scene, I see the tree object. So the parent object is the one we called tree, right? So go ahead and select the parent object of your object, the one that everything else is attached to. Select that parent. Now watch very, very closely. All right, I'm about to do something crazy. I'm about to turn into a prefab, okay? Make sure you're watching this. If your eyes aren't on the screen, you're going to miss it. Watch closely. Magic finger at work here. Here we go. I'm going to click on the tree. I'm going to hold it. That's important. I'm clicking and I'm holding. Now I'm going to drag down to the projects, down to where my prefab folder is that currently says empty, and I'm going to drop it in the prefabs. I just made a prefab. Did you see that? Do I need to do it again? No, I don't need to do it again. You're watching me on YouTube. Rewind it. I just made a prefab. Did you see how easy that was? Drag and drop. Drag and dropped it into the prefab folder, and it automatically became a prefab. Over here in the hierarchy, you see that symbol next to tree just turned blue. Do you know what that blue symbol means? It means that it's a prefab. All right, so what's the benefit of making a prefab? Here's the benefit of making a prefab. This isn't the only tree that's going to be in my game. So down here in my prefab folder where it says tree, I can drag it out, and I can put another one in my world, and I can put one there, and I can put one over here, and I can put one over there. I've got prefabs everywhere. Prefabs. 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 That's the benefit of a prefab. You make an object once, and now you have a place where you can grab it anytime you need it, anytime you want it. You want to see something crazy, though? Check this out. Let's say I made all these trees, and I decided, you know what? I don't actually love this tree. I want to make some changes to it. So I'm going to go down to my prefab folder. I'm going to double click on my prefab. And what it does is it opens the prefab in a mode that I can edit it. So let's find something about this tree that I want to edit. Maybe one branch isn't enough. So let me make another branch. I'm just going to copy this. If you ever have something in your world and you want to duplicate it, the shortcut to that is using Control D on your keyboard. Control D. Now I'm using a Windows computer. So on a Mac, it might be Command D. I'm not 100% sure about that because I use Windows more than I use Mac. All right, so Control D duplicates. Boom. I just made a second branch. I know it doesn't look like it, but if you look at the hierarchy window, you'll see something that now says branch 1. That's the duplicate, right? So I made a second branch here, and I'm going to put that on my tree. So let me just move it over a little bit here. Let me rotate it a little bit this way. And let me check to make sure everything is lining up. Oh, it's not quite touching. So let me make some more adjustments to this. All right, so I now have, let me move it up a little bit so they're not in the same section. There we go. So now I have a tree with 2 branches. So I took the original prefab that I made, which only had 1 branch, and I edited it. So once again, I double-clicked on the prefab. I made changes to it. Now, up here at the top, where it says tree, remember that used to say sample scene, right? Where it says tree, I'm going to click on the arrow to the left. That's going to take me back to my scene. And check out what happens. This is crazy. I click on it. It asks me, do I want to save the changes to my prefab? Absolutely I do. So I'm going to click save. Look at what happened to all of my trees. Look at this. All of my trees now have 2 branches. So the benefits of a prefab is that you have something you can easily put in your world, but the other benefit of the prefab is that if you change it later, it changes all the occurrences of your prefab in your game. All of them got changed. Do you have any idea how cool this is? All of your prefab can get changed. So think about this from the perspective of a game developer. If I'm building a world and I have thousands and thousands of trees in my world, and then I come up with the idea of, well, you know what? Maybe I can make this tree better quality. Maybe I can put a lot more detail into it. Maybe I can add more effects and visuals and blah, 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 blah. Instead of having to go back and undo and redo all of those trees I put in my game, all I have to do is change the prefabs. And if I change the prefab, it will change all of them for me. So cool. Okay, now I know you think we're done. We're not done because it's about to get just a little bit cooler. All right, you ready for this? If I have a game with thousands and thousands of trees in it, maybe I don't want every single tree to look exactly the same, right? So maybe I want some variations on this prefab. Let me show you how to do prefab variants. If that name sounds familiar to you, then you watch too much Marvel. All right, here we go. We're going to make some variants. So I'm going to select one of these trees. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to select one of these trees, and I'm going to change it in some way. You know what I feel like doing? I feel like making it taller. So let's use the scale tool, and I'm just going to change its height. I'm going to make a much taller tree than the other ones. We'll make it a little bit wider too, just to keep it a little bit balanced. But it's mostly taller. Okay, let me check it from the different angles. Yep, that's a pretty big tree. So I've got a tree here that is now different than the other prefabs. It is a variant of the other ones, but this isn't going to be the only tall tree in my world, so I want to make a prefab of this tree. So here we go. Right now, the one I'm selecting is the one called Tree 6. Let's rename it, just so that I can tell it apart from the other ones. We're going to call it Tall Tree. So how do I make a variant? Watch closely. Magic finger time. Here we go. I'm going to click and hold Tall Tree. I'm holding. Clicking and holding. I'm dragging, and I'm going to drop it in the prefab folder. Just like I did the other one, I'm dropping in the prefab folder, and now it comes up with the question. Would you like to create a new original prefab or a variant of the existing prefab? We are going to make it a variant. So I'm clicking prefab variant. So now I have 2 trees, one called tree and one called tall tree. And with the tall tree, I can put more of them out here, right? Tall trees. Let's put a couple of tall trees around the map. I'll put this one back here with those. So we got some tall trees and we got some normal trees. All right. So here's the cool thing about variants. The only difference between tall tree and the normal trees is that I changed the scale, right? Everything else is exactly the same. Here's why that's good to know. Because I set it up as a variant and not an original prefab, if I change the original, it will change the variant as well. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the tree prefab, and I'm going to change something other than the scale. Because the scale is the one thing that's different about them, if I change the scale on this one, it's not going to affect the scale of the original. The only stuff that's going to change is anything else, right? Anything else that I do will change. So maybe now I decided, you know what, that new branch I added, I don't like it anymore. Let's delete it. I liked it better the original way. I'm going to go back. We're going to save those changes. Oh, look at that. My tall tree also lost its branch. What? Yes. The changes stuck. The changes stuck. All right. And that can occur with anything. So basically whatever is not the thing that you change. So here, I'll show you another example. Real quickly, I'm going to make another material. So I'm going to create a material that is fall colored. We're going to go with a fall color for our leaves. So let's do like an orangish, maybe a reddish orange. What's a good fall color? I'm having a hard time finding it. We'll use that one. Okay. So I'm going to put this on one of my trees, and we're going to call it fall leaves. So I know what the color represents. And let's change its smoothness and stuff real quick here. Boom, boom, boom. You know what? I could probably go a little bit darker with that. Yeah, that's pretty good right there. So there's my fall leaves. Just like before, I'm going to make a variant prefab. So I'm going to go to my prefab folder. I'm going to go to that tree. That tree is this one right here. We're going to change the name to fall tree. I'm going to put it in the prefab folder. I'm doing this a little bit faster this time. I'm making it a prefab variant still. So now I've got tall trees, I've got regular trees, and I have fall trees all in the same world. If I go back to the original prefab, and I make changes to it, it will affect anything except the color. So let's say I make a color this time. I know I'm doing a lot of stuff with colors. Colors are fun. I'm going to make a red color for the leaves. So I put this on the original prefab. So all of the prefabs should change the color of their leaves, except for the one that was the prefab variant that had the leaf change. I know that sounds complicated, but I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. Let's show you. We're going to save the change. All of them changed except for those orange ones, because when I made the prefab variant, that was the variation. The variation was the leaf color. Everything else is the same. The variation was the leaf color. So if I go to the original and I change something else about it, like its height, I'm going to adjust its height, kind of like I did with tall tree. The red tree's heights will change, but guess whose height is not going to change? Tall tree's height's not going to change because that one is already set up. So there we go. These trees all got bigger. Tall tree still remained the same size because that was its variation. I know, I'm talking a lot. So a lot of craziness here. So here's the big takeaway that I want you to get from this. Two things I want you to learn from this video. One, I want you to learn how to make materials. It's really fun. It's really easy. Two, I want you to learn how to make prefabs. Three, I want you to know how to make prefab variants. So prefab variants. So I hope you were able to do that. I hope you were able to learn that. Remember, you can go back and rewatch any of this if any of that was too confusing for you, or if I went too fast. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. If you learned something new today, click that like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. And don't forget to tell your friends and family about this channel so that they can check it out and they can build fun stuff too. All right, I'll see you guys next time.